Hello. Today we're going to be looking at a particular type of form factor of CPU from the late 90s, early 2000s, called Slot 1. I saw on Twitter and YouTube a few people I follow have been doing a Slot 1 build off, so I thought let's have a look, see what I've got, and maybe I can build something up. A quick 5-minute history lesson. One of these CPUs is very different to the others. These are obviously all standard socketed CPUs. So back in the 486 and the early Pentium days, this is a Pentium 75. You have 3 types of memory, 4 if you include hard drive. You had level 1 cache on the CPU itself. You had level 2 cache, which could be on the CPU, on the motherboard, a little bit slower, and then you got main memory. So the level 1 cache on a early Pentium was only like 16k. I think 486 was more like 8k. I think it went to about 32k in later days. The memory is on die with the CPU core, and it runs at the same speed as the CPU does. The level 2 cache was then typically on a 486, it would have been socketed or soldered onto the motherboard itself with little chips, or on a Pentium could be the same, or quite often you had a cache on a stick or a coast module, which is like this. So it's 256k or 512k, and that just plugged in to a dedicated slot just for cache close to the CPU. This is the P5 era. The P6 microarchitecture, which was the Pentium Pro, came next. Beast of a CPU, very fancy looking. It's probably the best looking CPU of all time, I reckon. So Intel decided, right, this level 2 cache, it's too slow out there, it needs to be closer, it needs a dedicated bus, and they put it on the same package. There's a CPU and there's a cache die inside this one package. This is a Pentium Pro 200. It has 512k level 2, and later models, which started going plastic, lost the gold and ceramic, they went up to 1 meg cache. Level 1 was only 16k, but level 2 being 512k 1 meg cache was huge, and it was very high speed. Gave this its server performance basically. Problem with these though was the price, and the reason they're so expensive is that if there was any flaw in either the CPU core or the cache dies, then the whole thing was destined for the bin. This affected yields, and so they became expensive. So what Intel did next is they separated out the cache from the CPU again, but they put it all together on one daughter board. So this here is a Slot 1 form factor. I should say socket 7 became Super Socket 7 and socket 8. This is Slot 1. So this is, you can see a circuit board in there, and this has, on this circuit board you have the Pentium processor itself, and you have cache chips side by side. Could be one side, could be the other side, could be none in the case of the Celeron. The Celerons in these form factor had no cache at all, no level 2 cache at all, which is why they were cheap. But in certain applications they were fine. So the cache from here would have been 512k on a dedicated bus again, but separate chips. What it meant is if there was a faulty chip, then you wouldn't waste the whole CPU, you just put a different chip on it. Or if it's a faulty CPU, you won't waste the cache chips, you just change the CPU chip. It just helps with basically the yield and therefore the price. The cache was always 512k though, where this went up to 1 meg. So they doubled the level 1 cache to 32k to help compensate that. But you can see here, so this is plastic, that's just a little pretty sticker, and it's metal on this side. See heatsink bolts to it, and then you have some sort of fan either on the heatsink or nearby to keep it cool. I do remember I think it's the compact Desk Pros, the business ones. They had like a big silver aluminium thing with fingers at the top coming off. There's all sorts of weird designs for these. And then you had the Pentium II. They gave up on the slot 1. Time and technology marched on. They could now get the CPU and the cache in one die relatively reliably. It's 256K here. And back to socketed. Socket 370 this was known as. But if your motherboard that had the slot 1 supported later CPUs, then you could have a thing called a slot kit, and your socket 370 goes in there. You've got jumpers which control the voltages, because the voltage that the new CPUs have is generally lower than the voltages on the old motherboards. You clip your heatsink fan to it, and that goes in, and you've got your more modern Pentium 3s in your slot 1 motherboard. There's also, I believe, a slot kit that went backwards, so slot 1 but let you put a Pentium Pro on it, so socket 8, but I don't think I've ever seen one of those. So there's your quick 5-minute history lesson. Let's see what I've got to build with. A little while ago, as in quite a few years ago, I realised I had quite a few parts of a PC that I had round about the turn of the millennium. I try to keep my old stuff, but I haven't over the years, but I've got a few bits I still have from late 90s, early 2000s, so I was going to build myself my old PC, but it was an ABX1 motherboard and it had died completely. I couldn't get it to go. The 8-bit motherboards from back then, they definitely had a reliability problem with their capacitors. So anyway, I bought another slot 1 motherboard off of eBay, which is this. It's a completely generic. There's no manufacturer on it at all. It just says ABS1, and it says ABS1 no sound. You see there's all this stuff there where you'd have your sound card. It's just a very generic, I think it's a 440BX motherboard. Got your slot 1, your AGP, PCIs, and your SA. 3 DIMM slots. Nothing special. USB 1 or 1.1. So your CPU will go in it. You have these little clips on these. Lock it in. No idea how much RAM that is. I'll soon find out. So you've probably noticed little yellow stickers. It's 333. That's because it's a, if I can get the light or the camera on it right, which I can't. What you just see there, 333, 383 megahertz. And it says there 26th of the 4th, 99. There's some other number up there. So I used to work in a local computer shop in Southend on the A127 called Brunel Computer Services. They're still going. They've moved now, but they're still in Southend. They're still the same owners, as far as I can tell. Yeah, been going like 30 years. I bought that from them. I also bought this roughly the same time, 16th of the 4th, 99. This was cool. It's a generic RTL 8139A 100 meg PCI Ethernet, but it has a built-in 4-port switch. Well, 5-port actually, because you've got the internal one and 4 external ports. And this made multiplayer gaming so much easier, because you just get your mates' PCs, you plug them in to here direct, no mess around with hubs and coax cables and whatnot. Just made life a lot easier. Here's my network card, same place, Brunel. Matrox G400 is my graphics card. It's a G400 32 meg. I don't think it's a max. I think it's a G400 standard. G4 Plus MDHA32G. So this 1999 as well. So this, I was in the Matrox camp massively. I was not an Nvidia person. I was not an ATI person. I tried all the other name stuff like the SISs and the S3 attempts, but I found Matrox early on. Matrox Mystiques and the G200, and I got involved in Matrox. I did some beta testing for them back in the day. They used to send me graphics cards, and this was, I think, the first one they sent me. A G200, I'm pretty sure I bought myself. Yeah, I had a bunch of graphics cards of these, and this is probably my favourite one from back then. It's not probably, definitely is. Great card, good performance, the image quality is outstanding. Dual head, which was very rare for the day. Sound. This motherboard's not got sound. So I'm pretty sure that I had a Sound Blaster Live around about then. So I see this is copyright 2000. I did have some sort of A3D triangle shaped card as well. But this build anyway going to have a Sound Blaster Live. The original Sound Blaster Live. I think this is the CT4870. Great little card. Hugely fond of that as well. Hard drive. That's a Fujitsu from July 99. What's that? 4.3 gig, I'm pretty sure. These are the drives we used to use when we were building PCs when I worked in the shop. They were the most common drives. Extremely reliable. Well, I say that. I'll find out in a minute when I build this machine. Otherwise it's a generic floppy. Now I don't have a CD drive from back then, so it's going to be a slightly more modern DVD drive, but still. Then the last thing is the case. Let's see if I can move the camera to show you the case. This is the beast of the case I'm using. This is my original case back from end of the 90s as well. I love this case. All the cheap cases I had, building PCs all the time, the amount of times I'd slice myself on sharp edges, and you could always tell I'm PC by the DNA of the person because everyone always cut themselves in the cheap cases. This was all plastic covering the sharp edges, all rolled over. Loads of driveways. It's got a 5 1/4 down there behind a little door. Got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 internal 3.5s, 2 external 3.5s, another 3 5.5s up there, multiple fans. Yeah, it's seen better days, but you know, it's 20 odd years old. I've lost this front bit here, which is a bit of a shame. So it's by AVGS, filthy I know. It's called Cyber Fusion. It had this lovely little blue metallic like mirror on it, and inside floppy drive, and there's some sort of, it's a DVD writer in fact. That's far too modern, but there we go. Well, what a lovely case this was. But yeah, it needs a little bit of TLC. I may even remove the door completely because it looks a bit of a mess, but doesn't matter, I'm still going to build in it. A 300 watt power supply made by, not sure who, Gene Tech, whoever they are. So, I've got a fan on a bracket for the CPU. That's actually from a Zalman. Do you remember what do they call it? It was like a copper flower opened up. I had it on my Athlon PC, which is also in this case. Anyway, that'd be the fan to cool the CPU. Cables in there. So let's get building. So the build's done, but I'm going to call it an evening now on this. This will be part 1. I will follow up with a part 2 where I actually get Windows installed. I'm guessing Windows 98 SE, may even try out 2000 as well. And we try some games and some benchmarks. Thank you for watching for this slot 1 build off, and part 2 will follow soon. See you then. Goodbye.